Thank you, Mr. Osha, distinguished members of the panel and the audience. 3 weeks back, the Supreme Court of India launched the e-courts project, a project which allows courts from the Tehsil till the Supreme Court across the country to be connected on a single network. The idea: accountability, transparency, and ease of use of information and knowledge. And customers, the normal netizens, the normal citizens of the country who would be using this network for the purposes of accessing information. Today it's extremely impossible while sitting in Delhi to find out what the lowest civil judge in Jaisalmer ordered in a particular matter. You will have to go to the local place, you will have to go and engage a local lawyer, and then try to go through the local files and somehow get the order. This entire exercise will indeed be very tedious. What the Supreme Court and the Ministry of Law and Justice are currently doing are to come across with a network that can allow the facilitation of all this information available at the click of a button in terms of the use of convenience. And also, if you look at the first step, 15,000 laptops have already been distributed to judicial officers in the country. And this will go into 3 different stages. That's one face of the coin. Let me take you to the other face of the coin. Few years back, and I don't remember how many, the papers splashed with the news of the now famous and successful Project Bhumi in Karnataka. The first project to be honored by the World Bank, the first pioneer in its field of e-governance, and the recipient of various international and national awards. A few years into the working of Project Bhumi, I just happened to stumble across some documentation and examine the legality of the output of Project Bhumi. Project Bhumi is the project of e-governance, whereas computerization of land records has taken place in Karnataka. You can today walk off to any of these service centers, pay 10 or 15 rupees, and you get a computerized printout of the relevant patta as to who is the owner of the relevant patta, the piece of land. When I examined that, I found that, well, the printout that's been given, the final outcome of the Project Bhumi, which has been so celebrated, did not comply with the requirements of law, with the result that it was just a useless piece of paper which could be thrown in a dustbin by any court of law. Primarily because possibly in that enthusiasm, almost everybody forgot that there's something called an Evidence Act, there's something called an Information Technology Act 2000, and no matter what you do concerning the electronic format, if you don't comply with the requirements concerning the IT Act, and if the printouts of electronic records do not comply with the requirements of the Indian Evidence Act as amended by the IT Act, all your wonderful goals suddenly come crashing down. Because at the end of the day, the final consumer is looking at the final output at his place. Of course, subsequent to that, the government of Karnataka has started a process of legalizing the so-called product of Project Bhumi. But these are 2 different pictures to tell you the 2 sides of the coin. Well, e-governance, the latest buzzword, great. Everybody onto the bandwagon, great. Thousands of crores, great. What about legalities? In the hurry to go ahead and set up the network, is anybody studying the requirements of e-governance that the law is prescribing? Quietly, way back in the year 2000, the legislature had passed this cyber law, the first cyber law in our country, the Information Technology Act 2000. India was incidentally then the 12th nation to enact a cyber law in the world, and that at that time had specified certain requirements for electronic governance, which need to be mandatorily followed by any electronic governance project, whether done by the government or by a private vendor. And in case if it is not followed, the consequence of that is that whatever is the output of your electronic governance project would not legally hold good in a court of law. The litigation concerning electronic governance began in the year 2003. I filed a lawsuit in a litigation that was relating to the electronic tender that was invited by the government of Andhra Pradesh. The litigation is still sub judice. The court has passed an order, whereas all decisions by government of Andhra Pradesh in that particular segment will be subject to further orders of the court. We've had subsequent other litigations in different courts concerning electronic governance. So if we are still in 2007 thinking, well, electronic governance is a new buzzword and, well, it's all great to jump in, my word of caution, hold back. Just look at your responsibilities that the law is prescribing on you. Can you ever visualize that electronic governance or your participation in electronic governance, if not according to the parameters of law, could have civil and criminal consequences? What will be the consequence? The consequence will be for any person who comes in the category of a network service provider. The law defines the term network service provider under section 79 of the IT Act to include any intermediary. When the government does an e-governance project, it is an intermediary. Government becomes a network service provider. When a private vendor applies for a tender or contributes in the process of electronic governance, he too becomes a network service provider. And in this context becomes crucial the famous section which is now being made famous by the Bazi.com case more than anything else. In the Bazi.com case, the CEO was arrested. Why? Because what was the offense? The offense was some user had on Bazi put up a posting that he was offering for sale that famous DPS MMS at 100 rupees a download. 8 people had downloaded, and for that liability, the CEO of Bazi was arrested because Bazi was a network service provider. The matter and the trial still continues today. Under the law says if you're a network service provider, you shall be made liable for all third-party data or information made available by you. It looks good. Only in 2 conditions you won't be liable. Number 1, you can either prove that you had no knowledge of any contravention of the law. Alternatively, you could prove that despite the exercise of all due diligence, you still could not prevent the commission of any offense or contravention under the law. It looks very rosy, but a layman's version of this, which is backed by the legal version, is if you are a network service provider, for everything under the sun, you will be liable for third-party data or information. Your 2 exit routes are you either prove you had no knowledge of any contravention. How would you as a network service provider prove that you had no knowledge of any contravention? Anything can happen on your network. You will have actual no knowledge. But the actual knowledge is different from legal knowledge. The law says if you are providing a network, you are deemed to have constructive knowledge of what is on the network, irrespective of the fact whether you may have some actual knowledge of the same or not. So the only way to prove is that you have exercised all due diligence. And what are the consequences should you go on the wrong side of the law? Well, the consequences are criminally 3 years imprisonment and 2 lakh rupees fine under section 65 and 66 of the IT Act. Civilly, the exposure is 1 crore rupees damages by way of compensation under section 43 of the IT Act. These things haven't yet begun. But as I see down the horizon, things are boiling up. And it's only a question of time before these things happen. And if you as private players are feeling that you can piggy ride on the government for saving yourself from liability, you would be mistaken. The law has tended to given a limited liability to government servant who can actually show that whatever act he did under the IT Act was done in due faith, in good faith. Now this immunity does not apply to private vendors, to private individuals, private companies. So as I see the situation evolving, while the government could still go behind the cloak of anonymity